to say a prayer for us to get the meeting going.
Good morning, all. For those who are so inclined, we appreciate you in this posture of reverence, and those who are not, a little bit of patience. Most merciful and almighty God, creator of the heavens and the earth, and everything good within, we bow before you in humble submission to give you thanks and praise for the light of day and your grace. We pray for wisdom and unity as this oral hearing unfolds. Grant all participants clarity of thought, clarity of purpose, and the courage to speak truth in love. As we engage today, may we be guided by the principles of greater than self, principles rooted in service. Lord, constantly remind us that this hearing is a forum for truthful testimony and meaningful dialogue on the matters that impact our productivity. It exists to promote transparency, accountability, and fairness in decisions that touch the lives of our stakeholders. When we raise our voices with courage and conviction, we help shape the Bahamas where voices is valued and every community has a seat at the table. Remind us, as leaders, we are called to serve the public good, placing national service above self. Lord, let us not shy away from raising concerns that affect the people, especially those of the voiceless and underserved. We pray to be instruments of equity, working together to shape the utilities environment in ways that reflect justice, dignity, and opportunity for all. Guide us, Lord, that this hearing may bear fruit, not only in policy and prosperity, but in building trust, awareness, and transform across our archipelago. These things we pray for the betterment of your vineyard. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, forward, upward, onward, together. Amen.
Thank you so much, Dale. At URCA, we have a corporate culture of being on a first-name basis, but we all have titles. For those who do not know, my name is Juan McCartney. I'm the Corporate and Consumer Relations Manager. I'm going to call now to the podium our Chief Executive Officer, J. Carlton Smith, to give us a few words to just welcome you to this oral hearing. Carlton.
Thank you, Juan, and thank you all for being here this morning. I must say that Happy must have spoken to the Father, because some of the things I wanted to say he already said to him. But I will be brief. Thank you all for being with us this morning. URCA has a statutory obligation to host this event every year, but beyond that statutory obligation is a commitment to transparency and accountability. URCA must be transparent in all its dealings and want to account to our stakeholders, you, the stakeholders, on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we plan to get it done, and most importantly, how we're spending your money to get it done. And so I want us to think about URCA not just as the regulator, but as a partner in national development, partnering with all of you who are key stakeholders in the sector to advance the development of our country. I want to say that electronic communications, or ICTs, and electricity are two of the fundamental pillars of national development today. And those two sectors of the society, if executed and implemented properly, can be the catalyst for economic growth across this archipelago. We've been dependent on New Providence now forever, and we're still dependent 52 years after independence. The question is, when are we going to create another major economic center outside of New Providence and Freeport? When will we see another major city in any other region of this country? Well, the work that we do collaboratively with all of you, our stakeholders, has a significant role to play in the expansion of the Bahamian economy and social and economic development. And so I'm hoping that we can use these opportunities to work collaboratively to develop the infrastructure that is necessary to build new cities, attract new investments into this country, and hopefully we can see or your children and your children's children can see the benefit of your labor during the time that you were given to contribute to growth in our society. I hope that you use the opportunity to engage in a meaningful way with our experts. These are our experts who are sitting at the top of the table. They will introduce themselves. I am just the chief cook and bottle washer, making sure that everything gets done. But I hope we have a good time today, a very engaging and enlightening discussion on how we advance the development of this country. Any question that you have about anything that we're doing, we're open to answering all of the questions that you may have. Thank you and enjoy.
Thanks so much, Carlton. So just a quick refresher on how URCA works and why we're going to go through what we're going to go through today. So URCA is responsible for regulating electronic communications and electricity, as well as natural gas now, as I said earlier. But URCA is also mandated to be an independent regulator by the law. So we have appointees on our board who are appointed by the government, and then we have executives who are actually recruited through a rigorous process who are experts in the field. In addition to regulating those sectors, we make sure that we have to run a tight operation that's accountable to the stakeholders who fund our operation. So URCA receives no tax dollars. We are funded by our licensees, and every year we report how we spend the money that we've billed our licensees to operate and regulate them, we believe, fully in transparency. So we're going to go through our operations, we're going to go through our finances, we're going to go through the electronic communications sector, and we're going to go through the electricity sector. Now, I have a video to show you that kind of encapsulates our annual report this year, but before I do that, I just want to introduce you to some of the heavy hitters here at URCA. So here to my right is Nicole Watkins. She's the Director of Electronic Communications at URCA. She's got a wealth of experience, and she's going to go through today what happened in the electronic communications sector in 2024, as well as what's gone down so far in 2025. It's been a lot. Next to her is Devon Moss. He's the finance manager at URCA. He's the guy we go to ask for money, and he tells us no 90% of the time, but he takes good care of our finances and makes sure that the stakeholders' money is accounted for. Next to him, we have Jonathan Hudson. He's the director of the utilities and energy sector, and his remit is basically electricity and natural gas and things that are encompassed therein. Next to him, we have our Chief Operations Officer, Dr. Walden Russell, and he deals with making sure the nuts and bolts of the operation are well-oiled and that we can function to actually do the work of regulation throughout the Bahamas. So you'll be hearing from all four of them today. And again, as Carlton said, we're open to any questions you may have. We may not have the answers right now, but feel free to ask whatever you'd like. On the table in front of you is a QR code that will direct you to our annual report and our annual plan that has all the information that we publish. Again, we're transparent. You're welcome to ask us about any of it. And again, we're here today to make sure that you can have that sort of communication and commitment that Carlton talked about to transparency and bringing stakeholders in and having that engagement. We're going to play very quickly a short video that we composed to kind of just give you the gist of our annual report for 2024. In 2024, the Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority continued its mission to improve lives through effective utilities regulation. This was a year of shifting paradigms. URCA assumed new responsibilities under the Electricity Act 2024 and the Natural Gas Act 2024, expanding its regulatory remit across two of the country's most vital sectors. From developing robust licensing systems for natural gas to strengthening consumer protections in the energy market, URCA responded with diligence, agility, and impact. In the electronic communications sector, we advanced competition, strengthened consumer rights, and launched pivotal consultations, most notably on 5G deployment and updates to the Code of Practice for Broadcast Content. We also issued final decisions on market dominance in broadband and pay TV, and pushed forward with long-term reforms on universal service obligations and accessibility for persons with disabilities. URCA remained committed to transparency and engagement, hosting public consultations, town halls, and landmark conferences, including the Universal Meaningful Connectivity Summit with the International Telecommunications Union. At home, URCA began a major renovation of its headquarters while maintaining full regulatory performance through flexible work strategies. We also redesigned our website and prepared new digital portals to enhance licensing and consumer access in the near future. Despite increased workload and expanded mandates and the renovation of our offices, URCA met or exceeded the vast majority of its 2024 targets. Over 91% of complaints were resolved, major regulatory milestones were delivered, and foundational reforms were put in place. 2024 marked URCA's 15th anniversary, a year of transformation and progress. We remain ready for the future. URCA, improving lives through effective utilities regulation. Okay, thanks so much for your attention to that. We are now going to take a look at the annual report from the electronic communications sector for 2024, and to take you through that, we're going to have Nicole Watkins, our director. Please welcome her to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. Based on that video, I could have a seat, right? There's really, one's video was so, awesome. It just had everything in it. So with your permission, I could have a seat. All right, then. Okay, so as was said before, my name is Nicole Watkins. I have the distinct pleasure of heading the ECS team here at URCA. By no way I the worker. I'm supported by an awesome team of people, and they are really the experts. I just tag along, but I'm in the hot seat this morning, so here we go. I don't think this works for me. Okay, great. Okay, so as we wait for the slides to move, we'll begin with a brief recap of our 2024 projects, what transpired, where we are. I'm sure all those stakeholders in the room are very familiar with what we did, and we'll begin with the new ECS policy. The new ECS policy was finalized and published in October last year. That was a collaboration between URCA and the government of the Bahamas, and I know all stakeholders are familiar with it. It made some new strides in terms of satellite communications that might have been the highlight for that policy. Moving on from that would have been, we committed to publishing or consulting on a new quality of service regulations. That has not yet been published. We've deprioritized it, not because it's not important, but the work around satellite communications was something that is needed publicly to keep us stride at things. And so work goes on in the background with quality of service regulations, and we hope to publish that consultation before the end of trimester 3. The review of the ECS sector licenses and exemptions, work was completed. Most stakeholders in the room would have been granted a 15-year term license in 2009, and that body of work was completed, and new licenses were granted, or some licenses are in the process of being granted, but the major stakeholders would have received their new licenses earlier this year. What was that last year? Anyway. Universal service obligations and the USF, that's a big one for the sector. And before we actually get into the consultation, which we hope to be able to publish by the end of T2, early T3, we decided that we needed to really have understanding as to where the market was. And so we began the process of doing a census to understand in the Family Islands especially where the state of the sector is. That was, we sought a third-party vendor, needed to train up staff to get that third-party vendor's staff in order to ask the right questions. The results are in, we are analyzing those results, walking through that process, and as I said, we hope to be able to publish a USO consultation late T2, early T3. Based on the results of that, then the USF, the much-awaited USF, would be published, and we'll move on from there. The market review. So we did consult on the market review for retail fixed services, and that would basically be BTC's fixed voice and Cable Bahamas pay television services and broadband services. Good morning. That consultation wrapped up, and earlier this year, I think in June, we were able to publish the final guidelines and rules around that consultation, which has some consequential impact for the stakeholders in terms of their accounting separation guidelines, etc. The National Spectrum Plan, that consultation is our most recently published consultation, published sometime in June, early June, and we are wrapping up that consultation process. We've gotten responses already, and I think we're waiting for one or two more. The public consultation on the roadmap to enable 5G in the Bahamas. So that consultation was wrapped up. That would have been phase 2 of the 5G consultation. We are looking to do phase 3, which is the implementation phase, by the end of T2, early T3. We're working behind the scenes on that, and a lot of work has gone on. We're in the process of engaging with stakeholders who would provide and who would be in a position to provide infrastructure, and that dialogue is ongoing. ICTs for persons with disabilities. This is another project that we've deprioritized a lot, but we're committed to having a consultation this year, and work is going on to prepare that consultation, so we can expect to see that by the end of T2. The Code of Practice for Content Regulation, that consultation was wrapped up, and we intend to reconstitute that working group before the end of T3 in preparation of some major events we anticipate will happen next year. And our regulatory framework for satellite-based electronic communication services. So that consultation would have wrapped up in January. It was published just in December last year. And as we have now published responses, which were quite a bit, there was an awesome response from stakeholders in the satellite world. We have, about 2 weeks ago, we published the responses, asking for feedback on those responses because of the level of involvement from the sector. We decided to go to round 2. Once we get those responses in, I think the deadline is the end of August, anticipating the summer vacation and staffing for our stakeholders. We decided to put the closing date to August. We will then come out with our second round of consultation, wait for that feedback, and then we'll come out with our response to that consultation document. So that, in a very fast nutshell, is what 2024 saw for us. I don't know if we do questions after, or we'll do questions after. So we'll move on to what 2025 looks like for us. Okay, sorry. So that's it for me right now. We now move on to the other presenter, and then I'll come back with 2025. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Appreciate that. Now we're going to have our COO, Dr. Walden Russell, come and tell us about what transpired in URCA in terms of operations in 2024.
Good morning, colleagues and stakeholders. I want to thank you for that thoughtful and inspiring look back at 2024. I thought the video captured the work that we did. This morning, I'd like to take you behind the scenes and show you not only what we achieved last year, but how we actually got there. Because 2024 wasn't just about milestones, it was about reinvention, a year of renewal. Let's start with one of the most significant projects we undertook in 2024, the renovation of our headquarters at Frederick House. Now, that wasn't just about renovation. It was a bold, strategic investment in our work, in our how we work and the way we work, but also how we serve our community. As many of you know, our building is a 4-story complex. It has a basement, a ground floor, and 3 upper floors. For years, only the lower floors were utilized. The second and third floor, the 2 most upper floors, remained empty, gutted, unused, and unproductive. We saw that both as a challenge and an opportunity. So in 2024, we made a decision to fully outfit the entire building, unlocking its potential and creating space. We thought that we could use this space for lease or generate revenue and reduce operational costs. The work was extensive. We installed new mechanical, electrical, and plumbing infrastructure throughout the building. We upgraded our fire and safety of life systems. We reimagined our office layout to support collaboration, hybrid work, and future growth. And importantly, we laid the groundwork to turn unused floors into income-generating assets. This wasn't just about improving our spaces. It was about strengthening URCA's long-term resilience, operationally and financially. But as with any major project, it came with disruption. To allow construction crews to operate safely, to complete the work, on the ground floors and first floors, we had to completely relocate our work staff. This meant transitioning the entire organization to remote work. Now, that wasn't a small feat, but we were ready. We leaned into our existing IT infrastructure, our collaboration tools, and our digital workflows. We kept business moving without missing a beat. And even while working remotely, we delivered. We continued our regulatory oversight, and Nicole just spoke to you about some of the accomplishments in the electronic communication sector, and Mark will follow with what we achieved in the electricity and natural gas sectors. But we also rolled out major internal projects: the electronic document management system, the Power Automate workflows, and the Emerging Leaders Program, which is already building our next generation of talent. Throughout it all, we stayed connected, we stayed productive, and we stayed focused. 2024 reminded us that work isn't just about where we sit. It's driven by purpose, systems, and people. And it reinforced something bigger. That transformation of URCA's house, of our Frederick House facility, is not just about bricks and mortar. It is about capacity. It is about identity. It is about preparing URCA for what comes next. To every member of the URCA team and to you, our stakeholders, thank you for your flexibility, your resilience, and commitment. It's you that made 2024 a success.
Thank you so much, Walden. I would now ask our Director of Utilities and Energy, Jonathan Hudson, to come to the lectern to go through the accomplishments in 2024 in his sector. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody, to those in the room and those joining us online, and a particularly warm welcome to our friends from BPL and Grand Bahama Power and the other members, participants in the sector. Welcome again. So this morning, I will touch a bit on the annual report, but hopefully you've all read the 110, 120 pages and know it by heart. So I won't regurgitate a lot of what's in the report. I'll give you more of a feel of what we did, some of the challenges we had, and how the sector sort of ended at December 2024. Just make sure this works. So briefly, the structure of the now utilities and energy sector. We were always the utilities and energy sector, I'm told, but before we just previously focused on electricity. So now we have the Electricity Act and we have the Natural Gas Act, and I am responsible for both along with my team. That team consists of three main subject matter expert areas. One is economics. We have a regulatory advisor and a regulatory officer there. Legal, we have a regulatory manager and a regulatory officer there. And technical, we have a part-time regulatory manager there, and we have an assistant regulatory officer there. So that is the team making up the sector, 7 persons including myself. So a brief summary of 2024. What happened? What are the main things that happened in 2024? One of them is the Electricity Act was repealed and replaced with the 2024 version that became effective on June 1st. The government announced major plans for electricity sector reform, also introduced the Natural Gas Act. Much of the work we did in 2024 was focused on developing the documentation for that. And the energy sector reform commenced with BPL submitting requests for proposals for new players in that area. And we also started work on a new national energy policy. So touching on the electricity sector first, this was our work plan. Quite ambitious for 2024. We had some 15 projects that we had intended to do. The ones in orange are those that we either got started on, didn't get a chance to get started on. The ones in gray are where we didn't get any information. We didn't get any submissions from those entities to really work on that. And the ones in green are the ones that we completed. Of particular note there are the competition guidelines that were published in April of last year. And that deals with mergers and acquisitions in the sector to make sure that competition is maintained, or where there isn't competition, there's sufficient regulatory oversight to protect particularly the consumers in the sector. Otherwise, the BPL efficiency audit that was published in July, what that did was look at BPL's operations to kind of benchmark where they were at in 2024, so we can look in the future on what improvements they have made, and that's particularly relevant to tariff setting. So Electricity Act, that became effective on June 1st. It's similar in structure to the old Act. Some pertinent changes there. There was introduction of artificial intelligence. The rate reduction bond was removed. We added some new license types. It gave URCA greater power to really regulate the entire renewable energy sector. And also it provided some clarity on the regulation of tariffs. So these are our responsibilities now. Our main responsibilities are outlined in sections 13 and 14 of the Electricity Act, but those other sections there really determine and define the guide rails in which we have to operate as a sector. So if you wonder what URCA does, download the Act, check out these sections. You'll see in more detail what we do. Kind of where did we end the sector as a regulator, the electricity sector in particular? We now have these license types. We have a public electricity supplier, authorized public electricity supplier, independent power producers, transmission and distribution system operators, and system operators. We ended with 12 licensees in the sector, and we have now developed regulations to cover the major regulatory activities that most regulators would have in place when they're covering a sector. So I'll touch now in the next few slides on really where we ended, what happened in the sector and where we ended the year. And that really was, a lot of that was influenced by the government's energy sector reform, which was announced in June of last year. Some of the key points in there, it spoke about utility scale solar for the Family Islands, modernization of the grid, introduction of LNG to transform generation, and an equity rate adjustment. So BPL, who's in the room, they have a very large mandate. They cover the entire Bahamas with the exception of certain areas in Grand Bahama. And for them, certain independent power producers were introduced that cover these islands here. In New Providence, there was talk of additional generation at Clifton Pier through LNG gas turbines. There's also talk of power for cruise ships at cruise ship port. I mentioned these new license types. There's transmission and distribution and system operator. That really focused on Bahamas Grid. Bahamas Grid had a private placement memorandum, so this is public knowledge. You can get more information about Bahamas Grid in that memorandum there. But they'll be reinforcing and improving various T&D assets throughout the Bahamas. Well, New Providence, I should say. The government also, by order of the minister, introduced a rate reduction bond that became effective in July 1st, and BPL published those rates in their new tariff that became effective on July 1st. So kind of summarizing what happened in the sector. Previously, before the introduction of the 2015 Electricity Act, the sector was a vertical monopoly. You had BPL that did generation, transmission, distribution, and supply. What has happened with the introduction of the 2015 and 2024 Act is the sector has become unbundled. And that is intended to introduce more competition, more efficiency in each of those areas there: generation, transmission, distribution, and supply. So in theory, the sector should be better served through what has happened. Moving on to the natural gas sector. The Natural Gas Act was developed. We worked, similarly with the Electricity Act, we worked along with the Office of the Attorney General in developing that legislation that was also introduced in June of 2024. It's similar in structure to the Electricity Act, and our roles and responsibilities are summarized in Section 8 of that legislation. And this is a basic overview of the natural gas sector. Sort of similar to the electricity sector, it's entirely new, liquefied natural gas in the Bahamas. So I'll briefly explain what some of these components are. You have the importation of gas into the country that comes in as a liquid. So although it's called a gas, it's actually cooled down to very, very cold temperatures. And as the gas cools, it becomes a liquid. So it comes into the country as a liquid. It's received at an LNG terminal where it's regasified, transported along a pipeline if necessary, and then it's consumed. Typically, in this case, we anticipate most of the LNG will be consumed by the power stations. So this gives you a picture here. Number one is like the ship that will bring it in. That ship in number two can be what's called a floating storage regasification unit, where the product is stored and regasified on the ship. Or in picture 3, you can actually have the ship that offloads the product onto the land. It's stored, and then it's regasified and utilized, in the case of Clifton Pier, to be utilized adjacent to that facility. Or in items 4 and 5, you'll see it can be piped further for use elsewhere on the island. In this case, the plans are to pipe that to Blue Hills. Some of the other regulated activities in the LNG sector is what you call bunkering, which is where you have a large LNG ship come into the country, and then it offloads onto a smaller ship. Now, that might be a smaller ship that will transit out of the Bahamas, or it may be a cruise ship that decides to refuel in the Bahamas. Photo number 2 is we also will regulate gas service workers, similar to how electricians require an electrician's license. We'll regulate gas service workers. This is what really kind of knocked us off our rails in 2024 in terms of our electricity work plan projects. When we started 2024, we didn't know all this was going to happen. We were approached and asked to develop all of these, I think it's 22 documents, within a span of about 6 months. So the team, along with, we engaged a consultant, Frontier Economics, developed these documents, and they're to be commended for really shifting gears and getting this entirely new area done. So all of these are available on URCA's website, and as part of the consultation on these documents, we did an online consultation, and that online consultation is recorded. So if you want to know a lot more detail about these documents and the sector itself, you can go onto URCA's website. You'll see this YouTube video. You can download the video and get a lot more information on that. So that concludes 2024 for the utilities and energy sector. And if you have any questions, if you could hold them until the end of the other presentations, and we'll be happy to take them from you.
Okay, thanks so much, Mark, for telling us about the energy sector. Now we're going to have Devon Moss, he's our finance manager, come and talk to us about URCA's budget performance for 2024.
Good day, everyone. My name is Devon Moss. I represent the Finance Department. I'm here to give you an overview of the finance portion of the annual report. This is the 2025. I need the 2024 ones. Just in the interim, we will look at the results of 2024. This will involve us looking at our budget versus actuals, our statement of financial position, and expenditure over income. To tell you a little bit about how we got here, I'll provide a high-level explanation of our budgeting process. The URCA Act, Section 40, Paragraph 1, addresses the funding of our organization and states that URCA shall conduct its affairs so as to ensure that its revenues are at least sufficient to enable URCA to meet the cost of carrying out its functions. To meet this requirement, URCA puts together a budget which involves all the key players for both the regulatory and operations teams to work in tandem to ensure the effective running of URCA. The foundation upon which the budget is built is the annual plan. This plan guides us in determining the assumptions to be used in setting levels of resource utilization, both internal and external, and quantifying or placing a dollar value to these assumptions using the best available information at the time. This means that during the budgeting process, all initiatives, whether regulatory or operational, that in previous years or years which have not occurred, we determine how much financial resources have been assigned to the initiative, which we would label as a residual budget allocation, and reduce the current requested budget allocation by that amount. Once there is an agreed amount needed to effectively operate the organization relative to the terms of our mandate, we determine how much of the indirect costs are attributable to each sector and calculate the respective URCA fee for the specific year. This calculation is based on our recoverable budget, or the funds that we actually are requesting from the industry. So going forward, when you hear the term budget, it is the recoverable budget that I'm speaking about. So we'll look at things from two perspectives. One of the actual versus budget, and a year-over-year comparison. So we'll first look at the actual versus budget. So when you look at the breakdown by sector, you would note that the ECS sector generated a comprehensive income. This was due to the income for the ECS. The income for the ECS was more than budgeted due to fines and increased interest charges on overdue balances during the period. Next, we'll look at the ES. When you look at the ES, you would note that there's a more sizable comprehensive income. This is one, due to during the year, we took on the responsibility of regulating a new sector, the natural gas sector. In doing so, there was a sharing of resources, and this sharing of resources was mainly from the ES sector. As a result, a portion of the actual and budgeted costs for the ES were shared with the natural gas sector. Two, operating expenses are also lower than anticipated due to the need for URCA to recover bad debt because of a shortfall in the line item from the previous year, and lower than anticipated bad debt costs in the current year and the deferred regulatory projects that Mark would have spoken about. Next, we take a look at the natural gas sector. So I previously touched briefly on the natural gas sector, and the natural gas sector for budgetary purposes operated for the period of 1st October 2024 to 31st December 2024. So you really only have a 3-month look at it. You would note that there was no income for the sector during the period, but there were expenses. This is due to the sector just being in its infancy and needing to put in place a team with the necessary skill set and ensure that the proper regulatory framework is in place at the point in time that we begin to issue natural gas licenses. So these are operating expenses for 2024. We're just going to look at some of the more, I guess, material ones, or the ones where there are bigger deviations. So the first being the depreciation. Depreciation is greater than budgeted due to the carryover not being included in the total budgeted amount, as I would have spoken about in the very beginning. So when you look at the amount there, in order to get the actual budget for that, you would have had to have the carryover. So it would be the recoverable budget plus the carryover. And that is the reason why it looks as though the actual amount way surpasses the budgeted amount. And it's a similar thing for general and administrative expenses. In the previous periods, we would have had a great carryover because of not completing some of the things that we had set out to do, so we had a carryover for the period. Next, we take a look at premises occupancy costs. Electricity costs were less than anticipated due to staff working from home during the building renovations and the effect of the solar panel at URCA's car park. Next look is at consumer education. Advertising costs and costs associated with the digital strategy were less than anticipated, and that led to the variance there. Lastly, we'll take a look at office services, and the reason why that is lower than budgeted is because finance costs and office supply costs were lower than anticipated. Oh, there's one more. There's provision for doubtful accounts. And the increase in budget due to recovery costs from the shortfall in 2023 led to such a large disparity. So in 2023, we would have had a shortfall in the line item because we didn't anticipate so much of the cost of the provision having to be covered by those licensee who we still have judicial matters for. Next, we'll take a year-over-year. We'll look at the year-over-year comparative. And we'll take a look at our statement of financial position. So for the year end 31st December 2024, the net assets increased by approximately 13.3%. And we could take a further look at what caused that movement. Period over period, there's a 21.9% increase in non-current assets, which was due primarily to an increase in capital work in progress related to Frederick House infrastructure upgrade. Period over period, there was also a 21% increase in current assets. This was due to URCA purchasing investment securities to reduce the future impact of the post-employment benefit liability on the operation, an increase in receivables due to an unpaid fine during the period. Next, we take a look at total liabilities. There was an increase in total liabilities, and that is primarily because of a loan facility being established to facilitate the infrastructure upgrade. So next is the statement of expenditure over income. In this overview, the statement of expenditure over income compares the results of URCA's operations to the previous year. And you would note that revenues derived from fees increased by 22% as a result of the increase in URCA fee rate for the ES and increase in relevant turnover in the ECS sector. Expenses increased by 9% due to continued as a result of our work plan initiatives. Other income is the result of a fine issue that is unpaid and that is currently being appealed. And lastly, the remeasurement of post-employment benefit is related to the post-employment benefit liability. Okay. So now we can take a deeper look. License fee revenue increased, although the rates remain relatively flat for the UE and the ECS. Salaries and benefits increased in C as a result of new hires and increase in compensation and benefits. In D, which is legal, professional, and consultancy fees, this increased due to work performed on various projects such as natural gas framework and the 5G project. In E, premises occupancy costs increase due to increased costs of insurance and real property tax. In F, we take a look at professional membership, and during the period, a professional membership body reestablished operation. In H, interest charges. So in the previous period, there were no interest charges. In the current period, there were interest charges, and this is associated with our loan. In I, provision for doubtful accounts decreased in the current year because of continued collection efforts. And in J, I would have spoken about this fine a few times, and that is the reason for the increase. We issued a fine during the year of 2024. So that ends our review of 2024.
Okay, thank you so much, Devon. Really appreciate it. I also wanted to acknowledge the presence of a representative from the United States Embassy here in Nassau today with us, Ms. Ana Monteroso, Economic Infrastructure Officer. So perhaps you had a better understanding of that than I would normally in our meetings. So 2024, our annual report was titled Shifting Paradigms, because really, it wasn't since 2015, 16, 17 when the former Electricity Act came into being and URCA had to start regulating that, and the COVID-19 pandemic that we had such a radical shift in how we operated and what we had to do. So to encapsulate what they would have spoken about, we had the Natural Gas Act come into effect. There was a new Electricity Act that came into effect that was much broader in scope. that widened what URCA's regulatory remit was, that brought in system operators that would partner with BPL, that allowed for different types of licenses that all had to be crafted from scratch. We had to account for a natural gas framework that wasn't on our annual plan the year before. In the middle of the year, the government decided they had to move, and we had to move with the government because we have to implement government policy. So it was a very serious and trying time for URCA. And on top of that, despite all the work that we had to shift to undergo, we undertook a major renovation to our office. And when I say renovation, we didn't just go and break out some paint. We actually had to all leave the office. If we were not allowed to go there. It lasted for months on end, and we had to figure out again how to work remotely and how to get all this extra work done. So it was a very interesting year, and you could read more about it in the annual report, but it just showed that URCA is very resilient and able to adapt to things that shift quickly. So it was a lot of work going on. There was a lot of work that happened in the electronic communications sector with the development of technology that we had to strive to keep up with. So again, shifting paradigms, and I encourage you to look at the QR code and read the report, and you'll also have a chance to look at the financials. So as 2024 shifted, we had to figure out how we were going to approach 2025. Some things that happened in 2024 meant that we couldn't do some things that we had planned for, and then they had to shift to 2025, in addition to the things that were added to our remit, having to complete that and implement that in 2025. So 2024, of course, informed a lot of how we move forward in 2025. We came up with our annual plan, the draft of which was published by the end of the year last year, and again was finalized by April 30th. And I put together a little video to kind of give you the gist of what 2025 was supposed to be about, and then we'll talk about how far we've come this year. Okay. As URCA moves into 2025, our focus remains clear: delivering impactful, responsive regulation across electronic communications, electricity, and natural gas. This year, URCA will build on a foundation of major reforms laid in 2024. In the natural gas sector, 2025 will see the licensing of new players and implementation of operational codes that prioritize safety, efficiency, and environmental responsibility. These steps are critical as LNG infrastructure takes shape nationwide. In electricity, URCA will complete consumer protection reviews, implement revised licensing frameworks, and assist in the updating of the National Energy Policy 2025-2030, paving the way for greater renewable energy integration and private sector participation. In electronic communications, we'll complete consultations on 5G regulation, accessibility for persons with disabilities, and finalize updates to the Universal Service Framework, ensuring all Bahamians, no matter where they live, have access to reliable, affordable services. URCA will also launch fully digital licensing and consumer care portals, enhancing public engagement and operational efficiency. Internally, we're expanding our digital tools, finalizing our document management software, and strengthening data governance, advancing toward a smarter, more responsive regulator. URCA will also increase international engagement, ensuring the Bahamas remains aligned with global standards on digital policy, energy transition, and emerging technologies. Through it all, URCA remains committed to fairness, transparency, and excellence. The 2025 annual plan is more than a blueprint, it's our promise. A promise to regulate with integrity, innovate with purpose, and serve the Bahamian people. URCA, championing progress, shaping the future. Okay, so that was just an encapsulation of what 2025 was planned for, and then we'll talk about where we are now. Also wanted to acknowledge, you heard in the video, the National Energy Policy update that the government undertook, that URCA assisted with. That was also a huge part of 2024, as well as a huge part of 2025. We did a really robust public consultation throughout the entirety of the Bahamas that I was fortunate enough to be a part of with the guys from the Department of Energy. So right there in the back, thanks so much for coming, representatives from the Department of the Ministry of Energy. We're going to now call up Dr. Walden Russell to speak about the operational side of URCA for 2025.
So the last video you saw really set the tone, because 2025 is not just about returning to the office. It's about moving forward with intention, with energy, and with purpose. In July, we came back home. Construction on the ground floor and the first floor wrapped up in June. And just last month, we officially returned to office. And let me tell you, it was not easy. We left the building, but we returned to a better building. It's functional, it's connected, and it's ready for the future. Since coming back, there's also been a noticeable lift in energy. Our team is re-engaged, collaboration is flowing, and the space now reflects what URCA is becoming. But we're not done yet. Right now, work is underway on the second and third floor, the ones that were previously underutilized. We're converting them to fully fitted, tenant-ready spaces. Some of that space may even be used to support our operational growth in the future. We expect that work to finish by the end of October 2025 at the price tag of just under $2 million. At the same time, we're upgrading the roof, boosting building integrity and energy efficiency. That too should be wrapped up by the end of the year. And once that is done, we will fully recommission the facility and begin finalizing the income potential of our new leaseable space. But 2025 is not just about transformation. It is about transformation beyond the physical. This year, we're rolling out 2 important digital platforms, the licensing portal and the complaints management system. Both are designed to improve how we serve the public, faster, more transparent, and more efficiently. Inside URCA, we are focused on performance. We're launching operational performance indicators, or OPIs, across all departments. That means every role, every output, every result align with strategic goals. And we are restructuring. Our new organizational model supports our role as a multi-sector regulator. It's leaner, clearer, and more accountable. Strategic planning is also a top priority. This year, we are developing URCA's next institutional strategy, looking out to 2030, with clearer goals, clear metrics, and a bold vision of what's next. Finally, access. While we had to defer the Northern Bahamas office launch, our commitment to serving every island remains firm. We'll continue to use outreach, technology, and decentralized models to make our service more accessible to everyone across the archipelago. So 2024 was a year of transformation. And 2025, it's a year of reimagination. We're not just rebuilding, we're evolving. We're laying down the systems, the spaces, and the culture that will take us boldly into the next decade. Thank you for being a part of that journey.
Thanks so much, Walden. Now we're going to have our Director of Electronic Communications come back up, and she's going to walk us through not only the plan for 2025, but the progress thus far. Nicole Watkins.
Okay, so as I begin to recap our progress to date for 2025, and following on from Dr. Russell's comments about 2025 being a year of evolving, coming out of 2024, the ECS team suffered a couple human resource, what should I say? We experienced, we had the experience where we lost some human resources in that team. And so for 2025, a lot of the time has been spent building capacity, and we think by the end of the year we would have a team that is ready or is on the journey for evolution, as Dr. Russell put it. So we have made some progress in filling some gaps, and the gaps were necessary as we take, as ECS takes a turn into different types of technologies. It was necessary for us to upskill ourselves in that space, and so we are on the road to that, and we are seeing progress, and we're seeing more enhanced work product as we get on that journey. So I touched on some of these projects in 2024 and so 2025 is really a continuation of many of these projects, which we had phase 1s and phase 2s, and so in addition to evolution this year, I think we're focused on executing. So we've spoken a lot about the satellite-based electronic communication services, and as you recall a couple moments ago when I spoke, I said that we will be coming back to the table with our second round of consultation in the very near future, by the end of probably the beginning of T3. So as we see, we published a document, we've reviewed and analyzed. We've gone back to the public with those responses, and our next step is to publish the second round. So by the end of T3 or sometime during T3, we can expect to be able to wrap that consultation up, which will provide a codified framework for satellite operators to enter the space and be licensed in the Bahamas, and not just satellite operators who provide direct services to end consumers, but also the ones that provide services that you may not be too familiar with, whether that may be cruise ships or aircrafts transiting through the Bahamas. So we expect to have a fully codified framework in place by the end of T3. The Universal Service Obligations and Fund. As I mentioned earlier, we commissioned a census for this work stream. We've collected the data. We are analyzing the data, and we expect to come with the first consultation document for the USF framework by the beginning of T3 for consultation. National Spectrum Plan, as I mentioned earlier, we are wrapping up the consultation phase of that document, and we should be in a position to publish the final results by the end of T3. The National Spectrum Plan, as most stakeholders know, it's a collaboration with the government because they're the ultimate owners of the spectrum. And so this process may be a tad bit longer before we wrap up, because we do have to consult with the government before we produce a final document. 5G framework. Everyone is excited for this, and URCA is very invested in publishing a 5G framework that actually will be of benefit to stakeholders. We live in an archipelago nation, and we want to make sure that the 5G framework that we roll out for stakeholders will be something that consumers can touch and feel the benefits of. And so we are in the process of preparing that consultation document, but we're also meeting with stakeholders to understand their capabilities, their goals, make sure their vision is aligned with the vision, with the ECS policy as well as URCA as we roll out 5G. So by the end of T3, we expect to publish the statement of results for the final round. And we expect to be in a position to consult on this third round of consultations sometime early in T3. Cybersecurity, that's one of the buzzwords right now in the ECS sector. And we're excited for this, but cybersecurity for the ECS is a very sector-specific remit, and we are working with CERT, and as CERT develops a cybersecurity framework for the entire country and legislation, we will then carve out our niche for the ECS sector. And so in that regard, we're hopeful we get to it. If not by T3, it will be early T1, 2026, only because we can't set a cybersecurity framework without legislation really being in place for the entire country. The network quality of service regulations, I know this is something that customers are anxious for, and we are working to review the current network quality of service regulations to make it more fit for purpose, taking into account the evolving technologies that are being used and the changing trend of delivery of ECS services. And so we expect to be able to go back to consultation by the early T3 and wrap that up before the end of 2025. Implementation for fixed market services, the remedies. We wrapped up this consultation and we published the rules in June. And so the next step of this is really to investigate certain trends we have seen coming out of that fixed market reviews, one of which may be switching. And so we are finalizing plans on really how to further investigate and review those trends and decide whether or not additional measures, regulatory measures may be necessary. But we're in the formative stages of that process. And finally, I think ICTs for disabilities. We've spoken a lot about this. This is a consultation that has been deprioritized, not because it's not important, but just human resource challenges, and we run out of time. But we're very committed to having this document published before the end of T2 and to wrap it up by the end of the year. Infrastructure sharing regulations. The review of the infrastructure sharing regulations is a necessary component of 5G, as you may imagine. Part of the delivery and rollout of 5G is to ensure that we have the infrastructure capable of delivering 5G services. And so there are certain things we need to put in place just to ensure that there is not a wastage or duplication of network efforts. And so we plan to review the infrastructure and sharing regulations once we complete this third round of 5G consultation. And I believe that may be it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Okay, now we're going to look at the energy sector for 2025, and we'll welcome back to the lectern, Jonathan Hudson, the Director of Utilities and Energy.
Hello again. Yeah, so 50 plus years of independence, 15 plus years of URCA as a regulator, 10 years as electricity sector regulator, and 1 year as the LNG sector regulator. So where are we at? What are we doing in 25? So in the electricity sector, these are color-coded. So yellow is kind of what we're working on, what we may or may not get done in 2025. So these may end up being some sort of carryover. Red is something that we know is not going to get done. And green is we're very confident that we're going to get it done, or we have actually gotten it done. So starting with the yellow, we had issued some licensing reporting requirements before. Unfortunately, we found that our licensees have not been particularly compliant with some of those, and we've determined that they may have some challenges in complying with those. So we are a regulator. Our intent is not to be burdensome. There is information that is needed from the industry. We found that in particular working on the National Energy Sector Policy. So we will actually be going into the field discussing with the licensees what those challenges are and how we can improve that regulatory document. So that's planned for the end of this year. We've been doing a lot of work on licensing in the electricity and natural gas sectors. That's this project here. So as we've been going through that licensing process, we've been making a note of some of the comments we've gotten from applicants on challenges they may have with the form, some of the challenges we may have in receiving information from licensees. So we're trying to improve that licensing process as we go along. These two projects here, the Authorized Public Electricity Suppliers Consumer Protection Plans and the BPL Consumer Protection Plans and Contract Documents, we have a bit of a human resource challenge with that, so we may or may not be able to get those projects completed in this year. This one is not going to happen. This one is revision of the renewable energy frameworks. We have renewable energy frameworks to facilitate projects up to 1 megawatt. That pretty much covers anybody who wants to do renewables up to the commercial and residential level. Beyond that is typically utility scale, which is accommodated in the legislation and through the independent power producer license anyway. URCA had secured grant funding from USAID for that project. That funding has is no longer available. So we have postponed that project, and we'll see how we can possibly address that in 2026. The account separation guidelines, we have a consultation document issued on that currently, so please, anybody who feels they will be affected by that, go onto URCA's website, take a look at that document, let us know what you think, because once the regulation is in place, you'll be faced with that. Of particular interest for that document would be BPL and Grand Bahama Power. The return on investment for renewable energy projects. When we do town halls with Juan McCartney, CCR, we go out into the field and we promote renewable energy. We've promoted it in the National Energy Policy Framework. But rather than just promote it and say it's a good idea, we've actually gotten some numbers from people who have done these projects themselves, and we're running those numbers to determine what exactly is like the rate of return on their investment. So we can go into the field, we can say, all right, if you invested in a PV system, you can, based on what has happened in the industry thus far, you can expect a return of around this amount. So that project is in process. The National Energy Policy, we were asked to work along with the Ministry of Energy and Transport. We have some representatives in the room who we worked with. It was a pleasant working relationship. Thank you very much. And that document was completed and is about to be gazetted. It's a very comprehensive policy. Previously, the National Energy Policy just covered electricity, but because it's energy, it now covers the whole gamut of energy, which would not just be electricity, it'll be fuels. It talks about education of the people in the sector, talks about some emerging topics such as artificial intelligence, things of that nature. It's quite comprehensive, more comprehensive than the previous policy. So again, I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And that policy runs from 2025 to 2030. We were working on this project here, energy efficiency and demand-side management. It's spoken about in the legislation. URCA has some obligations with respect to that. This consultation document has been prepared. We were waiting until the policy was finished before we issue this, so that this document would reflect what's in the policy. So you can look, watch your URCA website screens for this document to come out shortly. The BPL fuel tariff review and audit. That is a review of what BPL's glide path. I think that was back in 2022 or 2023 October. URCA committed to take a look at that to make sure that BPL had actually achieved what it said it was going to achieve and operated within the bounds of the law in doing so. So that project is underway. We have the final report on that now, which we are reviewing, and so we'll be making the results of that public as we committed to do so. That's electricity sector. Oh, yes. Yeah, they keep switching it. Getting my steps in. So, in support of the tariff review, there is an expectation that BPL will be submitting a request for a tariff review shortly. As part of the new Electricity Act 2024, they are mandated to submit a tariff review by 2027. So the work on that is currently in process, and in support of that tariff review would be an integrated resource and resilience plan. That integrated resource and resilience plan looks at what the electricity needs are for the country, projecting out into the future, and the best way to meet those needs. You can meet those needs by improving your efficiency, so you don't actually need to generate more power. You can just use that power more efficiently. Or you, more than likely, would have to increase your generation capacity. So that plan would identify sort of what your capital needs are, and then your capital needs will feed into your tariff. So those two are in tandem, and that work should be underway. And when BPL submits that to URCA, URCA will review it, kind of vet it, and provide feedback and approval. Yes. So moving on to the natural gas sector. The natural gas sector, I'll kind of explain why we have a bit of yellow here in the next slide. But the guidelines for the regulation of tariff, complaints handling procedure, and procedure for investigations, these kind of come out of the natural gas legislation, the sort of statutory requirements, work that we need to do. And they're elaborated on in the annual plan. The ship transfers, if you recall the earlier slide I showed you when I was reviewing 2024, I spoke about bunkering. Bunkering is just from one ship to another. What we found is we had to review and revise those regulations to kind of deal with everything related to a ship. So not just from ship to ship, but ship to shore, shore to ship, ship to truck. So we've actually revised and published these regulations here. We've also started work on the gas service workers license. We worked with an international entity in determining how best to establish the practical and academic requirements for that. As Mr. Morris indicated, we have a budget we have to operate within. We found that in order to establish that, it's outside the budget, so we're looking at the scope to bring that back into the budget, but that's also in progress. So finally, when we come up here in these oral hearings, we mostly talk about annual projects. It's generally what the main focus is of these, but there's a lot of work that happens outside of projects. And this is particularly true for 2025. The majority, I would say, of the work that we've been doing in 2025 is related to energy sector reform and the introduction of new licenses. So when we ended 2024, if you recall, we had about 12 licenses. We're currently processing about 15 new licensees. So electricity sector is going to expand by 100%. Similarly, in the natural gas sector, obviously we started out the year, we had no licenses. We're currently processing 15 or so license applications. We don't actually have any licensees in the natural gas sector at the moment, which means we haven't received any license fees. which means we don't have the money to do the work technically that we would like to do, those yellow dots, in the natural gas sector. But we anticipate before the end of the year we should have at least 2 major licensees plus some will get the funds in, and we will be able to engage 2 additional staff members to assist with our work in the sector as a whole. If you remember, one of the first slides I showed in 2024 was the team of 6, including myself, 7. So we intend to expand that by 2. Another area we've been working on is complaints. Unfortunately, not everything goes according to plan in the sector, and persons rightfully are often unhappy about it, and they, after dealing with their utility provider, they bring the complaint to URCA, and we endeavor to resolve those complaints, which are sometimes a bit complex, and so that's been taking up our time. So based on this last item here, if anybody knows 2 very good qualified persons who are looking for a job with a dynamic regulator, please contact our HR manager or go onto our website. So that's it for 2025. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Mark. Appreciated it. We also call Jonathan Mark at the office too. We're on a super casual basis. Okay, our next presenter and final presenter, formal presenter, will be Devon Moss again. He's going to take us through the 2025 budget. Thanks.
So once again, I'm here to take you through the 2025 budget. Next slide. So we're going to take a look at trends first. In 2025, URCA's total budget is $11.1 million. As you'll notice, this budget is not evenly allocated. The electronic communication sector is 57% of the overall budget this year, which is a slight increase from last year. This is driven by the direct costs associated with fulfilling the ECS's mandate, the electronic communication sector mandate, such as conferences, training, travel, and costs related to the regulatory projects. If you look at the graphic, you will see that last year, when the Natural Gas Act came into effect, 6% of the electricity sector's costs were reallocated to the natural gas sector. This shift continues in 2025, with the electricity sector's share of the budget decreasing, while the natural gas sector's share is increasing. To clarify, the reason behind the change in the electricity sector's budget share, while the ECS's share remains stable, is that there is a sharing of operations with the electricity sector. As a result, some of the resources from the electricity sector are now allocated to the natural gas sector. So next, this table shows the budgetary lines year over year and the changes. Some of the significant movements affecting all the regulated sectors are professional services. So the budget allocation has been made to fund regulatory projects that the representatives from the sectors would have talked about. And you would have seen Mark show, what was that? Like 20 projects you wanted to do this year. So there is, of course, a need to fund that. Legal costs are anticipated to increase due to litigation. Consumer education and public relations budget will see a 117% increase. This is due to a few things. This is due to a reallocation in 2024 to support other initiatives, which reduced the funds carried forward into 2025. The remaining increase is driven by the resumption of Family Island travel for regulatory activities, as well as budgeted funding for surveys, brand audits, and community outreach efforts. Office services is also expected to increase by 71% due to finance costs, incremental costs stemming from remote working during the first part of the year, and other operating costs. And then you take a look at depreciation. Depreciation is being primarily driven by the completion and placement in service of the infrastructure fit-out project and other building upgrades. So that would be things like our generator, elevator, and switchboard. So next, we'll take a look by sector. So the first thing we'll look at is staff costs. Overall staff costs for the ECS have continued to rise, driven by annual increase in base pay rates and associated benefits. In 2025, there's a provision for new hires to address staff exits from the previous year and to maintain the necessary staffing levels for effective regulatory oversight for the sector. Professional services are expected to increase by 53% year over year because of carryover projects continuing into 2025, including scheduled market assessments, surveys, reviews, and the like that my colleagues would have previously mentioned. Next, we'll take a look at the ES. Staff costs and staff costs are anticipated to decrease by 18% as the staffing resources in the ES are being shared with the NG sector. Professional services, the budget allocation is being made to fund the regulatory projects that Jonathan would have again spoken about. And general and administrative expenses are expected to decrease in the current year's budget due to the correction in bad debt related to the underestimation in a major licensee's unpaid fees in the previous budget period. Lastly, we'll speak about the NGS budget expenditure. So the comparative is kind of a bit misleading because you're looking at 3 months versus a whole year. So staff cost shows the allocation for new hires as well as the proportional cost of the other sectors' involvement within the sector. And the professional fees are to fund the projects such as the framework, the regulatory framework, and to produce guidelines and for reviews of licensing documents. And that is it for the budget for 2025.
Thanks so much, Devon, and everyone else who had a chance to speak. You guys have been very patient listening to all the technical details. We appreciate that. Now we'd like to open the floor for any questions that anyone might have for any of our executives and managers about anything that was covered or anything that you're interested in understanding better about the energy sector or the electronic communication sector or URCA in general. Hi, good morning, Ms. Dill.
Good morning. This will be for Jonathan Mark, since you have 2 names. So as we know, the subscriptions are out as of Monday for the 2 new projects for BPL. And one of them is the natural gas, which you're talking about, the LNG, and you showed the large ship and then you showed the small ship. With the projects going on in the Family Islands, they've been talking about doing the LNG there as well. Would they do that through ISO containers, or how would they do that? Because I went to Jamaica to see how they did their system in Montego Bay, and then I went to Barbados to see how they did theirs because they ran out of plant was nowhere to come in, so they used ISO containers. And would each of the Family Islands, would they then be able to be licensed? Is that how that's going to work?
So BPL is in the room. They could actually speak to that project, but I'll speak to the regulatory framework in general.
Yeah, most of it was to figure out how many licenses would be able to be done with the Family Islands if they did ISO containers or however they were planning on doing it.
Yeah, so typically an operator will make a decision based on the quantity of gas being handled. So the cost to establish an LNG facility is significant. You don't need to do that if you're not handling large quantities. So it would be more likely economically feasible for all of the Family Islands to be supplied via ISO containers, at least in the first instance until things expanded.
Okay, so that would give you guys the opportunity, if there's 14 projects going out, that'd be 14 licenses that you'd be able to have.
Correct.
Yes.
In fact, there may be more licenses than that.
Right.
There's a license to import, there's license for facility as transport, shipper, retailer, gas service. There's a number of licenses.
And then the solar providers that would be doing the other part of the projects, right?
Yeah, the solar providers, so in the Family Islands, you may recall on one of my slides, there are independent power producers that BPL will contract with to provide them with capacity and energy. So under that independent power producer license, they can utilize various forms of generation, one of which would be solar. So that would be captured under their generation mix for their license.
Okay, so then there would be a solar license, and then there would be a natural gas license.
Correct. There'd be a license. There are licenses in the electricity sector which differ to licenses in the natural gas sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that was it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions? Yeah? Okay, you put that there, sure. If there are no other questions, I'll just field that one more time. Any questions for anyone in URCA at all? No? One more? Yes, okay, great. Thanks so much.
Not a question, but good morning, everyone. Nandi Maynard, Ministry of Energy and Transport. I just want to use this opportunity to extend our public gratitude to the URCA team for the work that was done on the National Energy Policy 2025-2030. It is a historic and very comprehensive document, and we appreciate all of the manpower. I heard you mention a few times lack of human resources, but with the small team that we worked with on URCA's side and ours as well, we got a lot of work done. And so we're very appreciative to you all for the time and the investment in that document, which all Bahamians will benefit from in the short and long term. And so it's historic, as I've said, and it's being gazetted. And I've been assured that that document will be ready for publication within the first week of August. So look out for that. Again, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Nandi. So I'll say on behalf of Jonathan and URCA that we had a great working relationship with the Ministry of Energy and Transport in helping develop the national energy policy, as well as fielding it throughout the entire Bahamas. It was really productive, and we learned a lot more about the Bahamas and a lot more about the way forward. So we look forward to continue working with you guys moving forward. All right. So if there are no further questions, I'll just ask our CEO to give a brief word of thanks, and then you guys can finish up with some refreshments. Carlton?
So now I can officially retire. You see the expertise that URCA has on its leadership team and the quality of individuals we were able to attract as leaders in URCA. They are the leaders. I am just, as I said earlier, the chief cook and bottle washer. They get the work done. And I want to commend them publicly for the work that they have done and are doing to ensure that we can effectively regulate the sectors that we have responsibility for. I want to say one thing, though, before I leave. The Commonwealth of the Bahamas needs development. And the work that we're doing now in the two sectors will inure to great benefit to the family island residents who for many years, have suffered through some painful experiences of having access to essential services. We are beginning to turn that corner, and everybody in this room has a vital role to play in ensuring that we can achieve that mandate. I won't be a part of URCA when that is fully achieved, but I'm proud to know that the team that we have assembled in URCA, the leadership team and the support staff, the supporting staff, who are dedicated to ensuring that we transform this country through the work that we do, are in place and will continue to provide the leadership that's necessary. URCA is not a penal organization. And so we want to ensure that you appreciate that we are committed to working collaboratively with all of our stakeholders to ensure that we transform this country. I want to thank all of the presenters, thank all of you for participating today. Next year, I hope that we will be required to rent the room over there because of the overflowing numbers of people we will see in this room interested in understanding how we are continuing to progress with the development of our country. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Carlton. That's going to do it for this year's oral hearing. Any information you're looking for can also be found on our website. You guys have a great morning.